You're listening to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show with Matt Entrikin and Jason Carey, your home for news, analysis, and everything Rhode Island FC. Each week, they take you inside the locker room, inside the tactics, and inside the storylines shaping RIFC. Now, here's Matt and Jason. Jason, it is cold out. We've had snow, more snow than I think we've had all year so far in just these first 19 days of the season, of the year, I should say. How have you been, my friend? And are you even more excited that we're now just 44 days away from the home opener of Rhode Island FC this season?
Super excited. Worried about if some of that winter weather is going to bleed into March, but we'll see when we get there. You know, speaking of snow and ice, though, had a great time at the Providence Bruins match there the weekend. Hot wiener night. So, hey, always
we got to.
Yeah, of course. Is there any reason why RFC wouldn't do a hot wiener night? I mean,
the reality would be, right, is they do a pretzel night. And now that I say this out loud, I'm not sure why no one has created the pretzel hot wiener combination. I would easily do a pretzel split open with the rest of the hot wiener fixings, 3 all the way. I think we may have a new business proposal there.
Some science needs to be done here, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you go out to an event, a sporting event, it's always a good time. I know we haven't gone to a P Bruins game yet together. I thought it was great. We saw 5 goals. It took me back to the Tampa game. I was re-experiencing some things that not often did you see at Central Bank Stadium last year, but all in all, it was great to see all the people. And, surprisingly, there was a lot of Rhode Island FC scarves because, it's wintertime. You're wearing whatever you can to stay warm. And Lord knows the club has put out so many scarves, and they will continue to do so into this World Cup cycle. It was great to see. I just don't know why the two franchises haven't partnered together to do a collab night. If there's a hot wiener night, why isn't there a Rhode Island FC night? And then vice versa, a Rhode Island FC game, why isn't there a Providence Bruins? I don't know.
I mean, even when you just think about like ice sports, hockey and soccer have a lot of similarities. Unlike other ice sports like bobsledding, which is really crazy to think that Jamaica has a bobsledding team.
Should I even ask why you're bringing that up?
Oh, because it's a great transition into Jamaica played a game here against Grenada, and the one and only Dwayne Atkinson actually got an assist in the match here. In the 81st minute, the only goal for the Reggae Boys.
I did see that. I mean, phenomenal. And it kind of went under the radar. I didn't see really anyone talking about it. I went and listened to the press conference from Coach Speed after the game. He was talking about it, gave not as many flowers to Atkinson as I think he deserved. Also, by the way, I can't tell. There's such few pieces of information out there about the friendlies in general. It looked like he even started as well, 81st minute. So he's playing a majority of the game. He gets the assist to the only goal that advances them. Well, not advances them, but gets them the win ahead of their preparation for that playoff match in the World Cup. Is this the chance that, could we see Busy as a major component of Jamaica's World Cup ambitions?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, it would be great to see some, championship representation in the World Cup. So hopefully the Reggae Boys can make their way there.
I didn't really think about it till just now, but I think I will. If Jamaica does make it in, I will buy the Jamaica Rhode Island FC scarf, and then I'll make sure Busy signs it, whether he plays it or not. That would be a memento that I would want for the rest of my life. But let's move into other news here, going around this the kind of the cycle. Again, this is the second show, really. This is the part 2 after so many things happened the prior week in terms of news releases. We teased it last week on the episode. We knew that the match schedules had been announced for Rhode Island FC for all of their regular season and Prinks Cup matches for 2026. And Jason, bit of a head scratcher, some surprises, if you will. Starting things off, first and foremost, there's only 3 afternoon games in the entirety of Rhode Island FC's season-long campaign, and they're the first 3 games of the season. First, the home opener against Loudoun at Centerville Bank Stadium at 2:30 p.m., quickly followed by Sporting Jacks, the next home game, at 4, and then that Detroit City home game at 4. I think there's 1 or 2 more additional away games. I think maybe with the Louisville game is also at 4 o'clock. But in terms of home games, only 3 of them will be played before it gets dark at Centerville Bank Stadium.
Yeah. You have any thoughts on why, outside of the matches you just mentioned, it's pretty much 7:30 across the board? There's definitely some mixed opinions online about that.
You're never going to please everyone. I for every family that says that's too late, I see on the counter side, I see that individual who's like, hey, I have my whole day ahead of me that weekend, so it's not as competitive. I can go get my chores done. I can go do this other thing, and then the real only event left for the night for me to go do is attend that soccer match at Centerville Bank Stadium. Of course, other things happen in life. I personally don't mind, but I'm speaking from a place of privilege of like family is not my family are the people I go to watch these games with. So I don't know why 7:30. It seems like it's also a later departure considering last year we saw games at 6 and at 7 o'clock across the board. Now, sometimes those games were delayed, right? Where, we were all in their gates and we found out 30 minutes later the game was actually kicking off. So I'm not sure what's really going into that. I know that last year the club had strategically set up that in the early months before it got warmer, they would have those games earlier into the day, which we're seeing as evidence in the first 3 games. But it's still going to be April, and we're going to be playing 7:30 p.m. games. And I'll famously remind people that we had a blizzard around Memorial Day 2 years ago. Like there was snow still falling in Rhode Island, so it's not to say that we can't still have, inclement weather that could kind of surprise us in those earlier games before the late spring, early summer really hits there. But the thing that just jumps off the page to me though is all of these times indicate that there is not going to be a CBS match in our future, as primarily those are afternoon slots, especially on the weekend, especially if it's big CBS. Sometimes it's CBS Sports. I just don't see us getting that CBS spot this year at Centerville Bank Stadium.
We haven't exactly covered ourselves in glory when it comes to CBS matches. I mean, if you look back at them, a Detroit 1-1 match, which, maybe the best
one
of the bunch, the best of the bunch, but
it broke Isaac Ganking.
Yeah, but the championship loss 3-0, we weren't that competitive in that. It was pretty one-sided. And then the 0-0 El Clamico. So maybe it's a good thing.
Executives are just like, we can't take Rhode Island's not predictable enough, especially considering back to back the next El Clamico the following weekend was a 2-2 barn burner that they would have absolutely loved to have put on big CBS. So I agree, maybe they've read the playbook and they're not sold on Coach Cano's offensive tactics just yet. Like I said, the only other real match that we know of that's early is that Hearts of Pine away leg. I've heard, Jason, that they have already sold out the supporter traveling section for away Rhode Island fans. I know that Defiant 1636 is getting a bus planned for that journey. I know we're going to be on that. That's going to be really excited as we cover the club and that match. Don't know yet if they're going to allow us to bring drums. I've heard some scuttlebutt around the corner from both camps that they're going to try to see what they could do. But the reality is when Hearts of Pine came down for us, we let them bring all of the thunder. They need to return the favor equally back. And then, of course, the game that also is on my radar, I don't know about yours, but I'm spying and circling that 10:30 p.m. West Coast showdown against Sacramento Republic right in the middle of World Cup. I think it's the Wednesday midweek game. That's not a game I'm going to the Guild for. I'm staying home. I'm putting the PJs on, and I'm hoping we get a win. It'll be body clock. It'll be pretty late for the guys as they take that on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, even the major sports don't really cater to the East Coast, right? You still see a lot of matches that'll start pretty late into the evening here, but it's just kind of rough in regards to you're not going to get anyone watching that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens. If we can find out more as to why the schedule was broken down that way, we should have Paul Byrne on relatively soon as we have him start to jump back on these shows and make an appearance. Maybe we can get some additional information, but we got more news to talk about around schedule releases, and that's the preseason schedule, Jason. We know that the players reported into medical this week ahead of the beginning of preseason. We know that Media Day will be shortly following here pretty soon. And we also know that based on the fact that Rhode Island's released the press release for it, we know that they'll be heading down to the very famous IMG Academy in Florida at the beginning of February for 2 weeks. So they're going to spend some time here in Rhode Island. I don't know if it's the same facilities because remember, they do not have their own academy. They don't have their own indoor facilities yet. I've heard that might be something that they adjust and fix down the road. And Centerville Bank Stadium is still very much an open air place. So they'll be spending some time practicing at Centerville Bank Stadium, one of these closed door facilities like Worldwide Soccer or wherever else around the state, and then IMG Academy for 2 weeks in February. Famously, what's missing from this though is the trip to Bermuda is no longer a part of the preseason travels. I imagine, Jason, that must have been super expensive for the club, right? Like that's money saved to go out and get a big name player like Cal Jennings here in the future, right?
Yeah, I think maybe in the infancy of the club, it was kind of novel, important kind of thing. But now they're kind of getting into the business of it. It's becoming a bit more routine. They got to look at things like that and say, "No, we can save a little bit of money and practice in Florida."
2 Bermuda trips, 2 Eastern Conference final appearances. If it doesn't happen this year, do we blame it solely on the lack of Bermuda? And do we need to fix? Is that a course correction for 2027?
We'll have to put a pin in that and circle back at the end of the season.
But let's talk quickly about the opponents that they will face. So on January 28th, they will take on the New England Revolution 2 at a location that will be to be determined. And then in IMG Academy, they'll be taking on new expansion side Sporting Club Jacksonville. They'll also be taking on USL 1 side Sarasota Paradise. I believe that's an expansion side this year for USL as well, right? Or did they come online last year? And
I was looking them up, and maybe it's just they originated in 22, but I was like, I don't think I've ever seen.
I think they're a team that started in a different league and has worked their way into it. Yeah, they're not quite. I think they're new to USL 1. Again, hashtag not a USL 1 show, so that's all that matters. And then they'll be finishing their IMG Academy trip with the Philadelphia Union 2 down there before they, of course, take on. And this will no longer be an alleged scrimmage. This will be Hartford Athletic away at Hartford's excellent training facility. If there's one thing Hartford gets to hold over us, besides maybe a Jägermeister championship trophy, it is that they have a pretty good training facility out there in Hartford. So that match will be on February 20th, and then they're going to capstone it off with a February 28th scrimmage against the other expansion side in Brooklyn FC. So when you think about it, they're going to see Brooklyn and Hartford at least 4 times this season. You can't make that up. So we'll see Jackson Lee. We'll talk about that a little bit later, as well as some other alumni. But that is the breakdown as we know it, and that doesn't necessarily mean other teams won't be in the mix as well.
Yeah, any surprise here that we're not playing an MLS Prime team, if you will? We so far in the first 2 off seasons did, but it's only looking at what Next Pro here.
Yeah, I have theories about it. I think that relationship wise, some tensions between Orlando and the club from last season. I don't know if maybe Orlando, and I don't mean in a bad way, but like maybe Orlando didn't think they were getting anything of it, and then maybe when Rhode Island FC blanked them, I think it was 4-0 in the last season's preseason. Maybe Orlando felt like the teams that they were rotating, the players they were offering, or it wasn't making any sense. And then also remember too, the club is kind of going a little bit later this year to IMG. Normally they would go in earlier in January. The Revolution are down there right now. Whether they stay through that period or not, teams may already be transitioning because MLS's window is moving up because they will not be playing through the World Cup break. So maybe because of the accelerated times, schedules didn't meet up this time around.
Yeah. So Hartford, 3rd year in a row. Is this just part of proximity, tied in with the rivalry? We're just gonna play them every year, preseason friendly.
Absolutely. What I think is really missing here is the Hearts of Pine. Seeing that they are missing, and we didn't know that they were going to play last year. That was a very last minute. They came down to Centerville Bank Stadium, so I wouldn't be surprised if they come down to test their mettle, as we're one of the closest teams.
Alleged matches.
Well, and again, these teams can always play more matches in between if they want to make the travel. So that's what it is. But we got to go to break, and when we come back, more players have left the club ahead of this preseason. We got to talk about that, and we got to ask ourselves if this is a sign of change on the horizon for Rhode Island FC. We're going to discuss all of that after the break, all here on the Raising Anchor Soccer Show. Thank you for listening to tonight's broadcast, powered by Sprout Coworking. For all your business needs, large or small, visit sproutcoworking.com. Powering 990 WBOB, that's sproutcoworking.com. Now let's get back to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show on 990 WBOB with Matt Entrikin and Jason Carey.
I know I'm normally the one to bring up, RIPs, and
I've missed them.
It's not let's also be clear. This is not exactly an RIP. Maybe an RIP to a career here with RIFC.
Jason, there's been a death in the family. What are you talking about?
It's a bit of an unexpected one here. After hours on Friday, the club announced that Ame Mabika and RFC had mutually agreed to part ways ahead of the 2026 season. Raises a little bit of eyebrows here. Why post it so late in the day? Why not try, sell, transfer him to get some money like we did with Chico and Maxi? It's just a lot of questions here.
Yeah, so I reached out to the communications team. I asked if there were, threads that needed to be pulled and find out more. The reality was, that they had been told that this decision had been made, and then they just needed to get the information out there. Obviously, Friday after 5 o'clock is never a good sign, but when you think about the weekend, and then that the team was reporting in on Monday for medical, the second you see Ame still in Lexington, where I think he's from Lexington in Kentucky, or you see him still traveling, or you see him talking to someone, he gets spotted at maybe whatever club he wants to go to next. It's always more important to get in front of it than to be behind. A lot of these transfers, it's all about the timing, and sometimes when it's club to club, they'll try to work together to coordinate that. But if they're just releasing a player, they have to do what and they have to do what they need to do, and that sometimes means that they're just going to get that information out there the second that it needs to be out there, even if it is at like 7 o'clock on a Friday night. So what this tells me is that, because like you said, Jason, there's no sign transfer, there's no fee, there's no agreement there. It's just a mutual termination of a contract. For what I would say, and this is not me knowing anything from the club side, this reeks of Mabika wanting out. This tells me that, if Kano didn't have Mabika in his plans, let's parallel this to Chico and Maxi, like you said a second ago. There were conversations. They didn't just return to their previous clubs. There was a transfer fee discussed so that all parties could be made whole to a certain extent. If Mabika had expressed, whether it was yesterday or a week ago or 2 months ago, that he was no longer interested in playing for this team, Kano is a player's coach. He would have worked on something and said, okay, well, where do you have ideas? Where are your agents talking about where you'd like to go? And something could have started a discussion, so that could have kind of come across the board, if you will. For me, what this says is that Mabika, I think, did some soul searching over the break, and he looked at what this team was becoming, and he realized quickly that he went from when he signed on, Jason, he replaced Yao right away, because Yao had the briefest moment of a hiccup in his season right about the time that Mabika showed up. So Mabika immediately replaces Yao. Then Yao gets his starting spot back in the center line, and he drifts over to the left side as the left center back. Plays that for the next 2 to 3 months. Amity Diop shows up with just a handful of games left. We all didn't really know what to make of him, and within 3 games, he became the lock-on starter on that left side. You see the reinforcement of Kano's desire to have that left-footed center back on that side. Mabika's got to be going into this offseason going, well, I'm now one of 5 center backs, and there's really only one spot that, on any given day is up for grabs, and it's that right-sided center back side, where I'm now competing against Frank Nadarce, I'm competing against Grant Stoneman, and I'm potentially competing against Hugo Bacharach. Why would he want the competition? And that's, Jason, us assuming we're going to stay with a back 3 into 2026. With all of these wingbacks and fullbacks we've signed, if we go to a back 4, that then makes it a 2 center back system. And Mabika is definitely, at his height, not exactly one of the quickest defenders. He could have seen the writing on the wall and said, hey, I got to try to go somewhere else. And maybe this discussion, maybe this epiphany came late for him, or maybe he wants to go and pursue becoming a lawyer and move on to other destinations, other ideas. But for me, again, this screams that Mabika wanted out, and Kano wasn't going to hold him up, but also Kano didn't have the time or resources to potentially get him on to another organization. Now, again, all my hypothesis could be completely wrong, but I don't think Kano forced Mabika out. If anything, Mabika just wanted to go, and Kano's a player's coach and said, hey, you got it.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on in what I would guess in terms of what happened here. He probably did not want to fight for a spot in this team, get relegated to the bench there, if you will. I guess the only thing is, when we signed him, he didn't have a club at all. Right. And he was somewhat of an emergency signing, and he integrate into the team pretty well. I'll be curious to see if this pans out for him, if there's actually something maybe lined up, or does he find himself in another similar situation where he doesn't have a club and he has to maybe wait till mid-season till someone needs someone before he's picked up.
I feel like the stock price of a defender from Rhode Island FC has to command a high price within the championship right now. Because like if you look at what the three best teams defensively in the league last year were, it was Louisville, Pittsburgh, and Rhode Island FC. And Louisville's defense came at the expense of like it had a high flying offense. Really, it was the Pittsburgh and Rhode Island FC defenders that put in a lot more work for a lack of goal production on the offensive side. I can't think that if he wants to play in the championship, and maybe clubs didn't know he was going to be a free agent at this point, but I can't think that, not at least every single USL Championship club's GM called Mabika's agent and said, like, give us the lowdown, like what's going on with him.
There's still plenty of time. It wasn't 2 years ago Las Vegas signed like their entire squad the day before like their first match.
Exactly. If was it Dennis Sanchez that did that, or no, Nocerino did that.
Yeah.
If Nocerino can sign an entire team, Mabika can find a home in the championship if he wants to. I mean, and who knows? Again, we just don't know what's going on there. But moving on, Mark Ibarra, another player this last week that hinted that his time with Rhode Island FC may actually, in fact, be finally done. Posted a very cryptic social media post thanking fans, thanking the community, thanking his teammates, and wishing everyone the absolute best of luck, indicating that there was a strong likelihood he's been moving on. The club hasn't officially announced anything, so we don't know for sure if the negotiations are over. We never saw the thank you post for that, but it looks like Mark Ibarra and his time with the Amber and Blue may be over.
Yeah, he did leave out RIFC there, so I don't know if maybe there's a little bit of frustration from his part about not gaining an opportunity to come back.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that he was rehabbing a lingering injury that had kept him in kind of a rotation of off the roster, the game day roster on. I mean, there was that game famously where he was dressed, we thought he was back, and then I think he went 5 weeks before we saw him back on the game day roster. We did know that he was going to go to the West Coast to rehab and that injury, and that a lot of the negotiation, which had been taking place earlier in the season, the club had every intent of trying to find a way to bring him back, at least initially. But I think that injury kind of put a asterisk, or at least let's wait and see what happens with it. Hard to understand what the impact of that was, or if the club just changed directions and decided to move on. But it looks like those conversations have broken down now. And unfortunately, that's it for the garbage man, as his time with Rhode Island FC most likely again coming short.
It's kind of wild to think that potentially the last action we saw from him was getting red carded in that Eastern Conference final. Not maybe the best way to leave a club, but maybe he didn't realize that was how it was gonna go out.
Can you imagine the conspiracy theories, the tinfoil hat that will be put on? Because people have been speculating this online, Jason, that there's a potential reuniting with Chico at Pittsburgh based on the way Chico wrote a post that said "roomie love," and we don't know who his roommate was at Rhode Island FC, and we also know they were together at Pittsburgh. They could have been roommates in Pittsburgh, but with knowing so little right now, there's a growing caucus of people that are like, he's going back to the Riverhounds, he's following Chico, and they're all activating in their mind this theory that, like, yeah, he was a sleeper cell sniper, and he was always going back to Pittsburgh. He knew what he was doing in that red card in the Eastern Conference final. I don't think there would be a worse scenario than finding out that Mark Ibarra is returning to Rob Vincent's side in 2026.
So is this the real reason Bob Lilly got left behind? Because he was trying to create like super soldier, like soccer players?
I think Mark would appreciate you calling him a super soldier, but nevertheless, we wish Mark the best. We also wish Ame the best in all of their travels. Ame, if he stays in the championship, just get a goal with your head for once, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I think of Mabika famously
probably against us, knowing our
maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think of him famously, getting us past Charleston, winning our first ever penalty shootout. He was the guy that got it across the finish line. So I thank him for that, and for Mark and all of his time. Again, he was such the unpraised, unapologetic defensive shape that we had in that midfield that really did a lot of the dirty work. And I think he will always go. He would probably be the most unremembered of the group, but his work was probably some of the most important. It was never flashy, but he was very important to this team. And I'm going to miss both of them, to be honest. And I guess we'll go to break, but when we come back, because we have another player we have to talk about from a departure standpoint, so I'll just save it for after the break. But what are your final thoughts of Mark and Ame?
Yeah, I echo a lot of the same sentiment there. Mark did a lot of the dirty work, won't get appreciated, but the real ones will know. And then Ame, stepped in and really helped us out. And unfortunately, just some better options kind of came up pretty quickly, and he lost the spot there.
We shall see what happens with both of them when we come back. We've got the keeper trifecta of updates with a new keeper arriving, another keeper leaving, and one staying, all here on the Raising Anchor Soccer Show. Fans, as the weather becomes more and more unpredictable, be sure to check out 990 WBOB's weather page for all your temperature, storm, and travel info. Stay prepared for whatever Mother Nature has in store with the 990 WBOB weather page. Now, let's get back to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show on 990 WBOB with Matt Entrikin and Jason Carey. I mean, this isn't a surprise, right? We had just talked about two players in the previous segment having left. This player has already been gone for a while. In fact, they were the first player to be announced that they would not be returning in one goalkeeper, Jackson Lee. We finally know where he's gone. And it's a place that we're going to be very familiar with here in this 2026 season. The best part of it is that we'll see them 4 times, at least 3 and open to the public. Who knows about this preseason matchup? Jackson Lee is now with expansion side Brooklyn FC alongside former RFC defender Gabby Alves and former RFC prospect and PC grad Lucas Burns. A lot of people don't know Lucas was on Rhode Island FC's radar very early on. He chose to go a different path with first the Portland Timbers 2, and now he's also joining Brooklyn FC. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's great to see some alumni, especially some fan favorites, if you will, kind of continue to navigate through the soccer landscape, right? This is a career that can be very short for some people, and some people don't make it and kind of drop off. So I'm glad for them to see them, continue on. I hope that they do well. I just kind of wish it wasn't an Eastern Conference rival, if you will. There's plenty of teams on the West Coast that we get to see them, but then if they start putting up good performances against us, you're like, oh man, you hate to see it. Do we expect Lee to be a starter? I know that they announced another keeper kind of right off the bat here, and he was an addition afterwards.
Yeah, that is the confusing part. Burns is getting announced alongside Alves and what I'm now calling lesser famous Mangione after all of that controversy last week in New York. Man, that is a tough thing to have to deal with. I would imagine Lee had his ability to choose from a crop of a lot of championship and USL 1 clubs when it came to his options. It was never really clear if he was going to stay at this level or if he was going to go back to like Next Pro with the LAFC side. Was he going to go into their 2 side? He's older now, so would that have made sense? So it's good to see him back but it is confusing that one of the first announcements was a MLS Next Pro player and not Lee. I don't know the timing of this, if Lee just hadn't penned the contract yet and they just wanted to get names out there. I imagine he's in the driver's seat of the primary keeper, but also to Burns' credit, he is a very competent keeper, and MLS Next Pro is not nothing. So I imagine that Burns is going to give him a run for his money, the same way Lee was giving Vegas a run for his money. So competition breeds competence, and we'll see what happens for him in his time with Brooklyn. But yeah, it's good to see him. It's unfortunate that we're going to see him that many times because we want to score lots of goals this year, and I didn't want to do that to Jackson Lee. So we'll have to see what happens for him.
Yeah, I mean, at least he didn't go back to LAFC. That would have been kind of a dead end for him.
That's what really matters. Yeah, you're picking up on all the right places. But in addition to the fact that we lose Lee, a signing is there to maybe replace him. We'll talk about that, as Rhode Island FC announced last week that goalkeeper Jacob Castro would be signing with Rhode Island FC for 2026. The 26-year-old 6'4", he's a tall guy, Jason, shot stopper joined the Ocean State Club after spending his first 3 years of his professional contract with the MLS side Seattle Sounders. Mostly, though, he was playing for MLS Next Pro's Tacoma Defiance down there and that side of things. But Cano Smith, head coach and general manager, had some really good things to say about him. He said he's a skilled goalkeeper who's going to bring value, competition, and depth to the goalkeeping core. And then he told him that his experience in training was with playing in a first-class MLS organization like the Sounders was going to be a critical addition as they prepare a very busy schedule next season. But Jason, the real question is this Sounders homegrown the real deal? And more specifically, is he going to be able to replace Jackson Lee in the net?
You know, it's crazy to think, do you know that Stephen Fry is still playing? He's 39 years old. Hashtag not an MLS show, but it's kind of crazy. So in that regards, there really was nowhere for him to go there. I think that he, probably career-wise made the right decision to move on there. We kind of dive into him a little bit. There's not a lot of tape on this guy. A lot of the stuff you're going to pull up is from 7-8 years ago, from early stuff, so that you have to take that with a grain of salt. He spent a lot of time in MLS Next Pro with over 4,700 minutes and 47 appearances for Tacoma Defiance. Of the stats that we do know here, 14 appearances in 2025 with 45 stops and a save percentage of 58%. When we aggregate his percentage across all games, it actually gets a little bit higher there, up to 64.8. If we do a little bit of a comparison here in terms of, looking at Jackson Lee, 2025 for him, 720 minutes across 8 games, played in the championship with 18 saves, 10 goals against, and 1 clean sheet, netting him 64.3% save percentage. So Lee had a slightly better season here. I think that it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, though. Here, championship probably going to have a bit better defense than you would in MLS Next Pro, where it's a little bit all gas, no brakes kind of stuff going on there. So clean sheet saves, it's hard to really compare those, if you will.
Agreed. And also Next Pro as a feeder, you never know what players one week will be in the squad or get called up or, just not cutting it. And from what I've seen, there's a lot more rotation in a more traditional farm system like an MLS Next Pro side. So that makes total sense. I'm hearing the numbers. You said, 45 stops across 14 matches. That's about 3 stops a game, which isn't nothing, right? Like that's facing a lot of shots. But what I haven't heard you answer yet, you said it wasn't apples to apples. Is he better than Jackson Lee? Because that's what that's the baseline, right? Like we're now into this first era of an important positional player gone. And so this will be, I think, probably the first example really of us using a former player as a baseline towards the progress or decline of progress in a new signing. So I know it's early, but what does your gut tell you?
It's hard to say, but when we look at some of what he did, it's kind of impressive here. He took US 01 rivals, back-to-back finalists in Spokane Velocity in the US Open Cup, and advanced all the way to the 4th round. When we compared these leagues before, he's never made the jump to MLS, though. And it's weird. He's missed some large chunks of time with Tacoma. We tried to look into exactly why that was. MLS Next Pro data sometimes can be kind of hard to grab. So we're not sure if that was injury related or form.
So I agree. And you're right with those chunks. It's like sometimes you want to go in and just watch Tacoma tape and because you can get the player personal highlights and then sometimes you get the team highlights. And I had to go in and track because he would be gone for chunks of time. There'd be 3 games where he just didn't even make the bench. So I actually went, and I don't even like admitting this, but I went through way too much Tacoma Defiance tape today, found the games where he was there, and watched some of his participation. Most famously, I think he did have a really good game against Ventura County Fusion, which is the LA Galaxy 2 affiliate. And he had I think 6 saves against them in a game where Defiance beat them 4-0. So he definitely has some stopping power. I didn't get to see enough of his distribution, although I did reach out and talk to some Seattle fans that I know personally that follow both the Next Pro and the MLS senior side. They said that from what they know of him, he's a pretty good distributor. He definitely, in the systems that he was playing in, they would like to see him play out of the back. That feels like it would be more akin to what we've seen with Koke, which means maybe we're modeling similar play styles. I always felt like Jackson Lee was the yin to Koke's yang, if you will. So I don't know what that would mean in terms of long ball accuracy or, route one in that sense. But I think, for what this is, I think this is the opportunity for a guy who's never been able to break out into Division One to instead now go into Division Two and really see what he can do with his minutes. Now, how Kano uses him in things like the Open Cup this year and also in the Prinks Tire Cup. I got to get used to saying that. Yeah. We'll see what happens. And remember, too, and I hate to say this, but also Koke has not yet played a whole season and remained healthy. So it'll be really interesting to see. The one thing I would say, though, if I had to pull just like rabbits out of my hat for the time being without enough tape to qualify him, there's two big things that I would call out for any goalkeeper that played and is a homegrown from an MLS side. One, regardless of the fact that you're still an MLS Next Pro, especially at the keeper position, you are getting call-ups and you are facing off against the senior side much more frequently than any player that would traditionally play in a defender, midfielder, or forward capacity. If one of the keepers in the first team is on like a knock and like they need an alternate for training alone, he's going to be one of the first players that goes up to help out with training and practice at the MLS first team side. And then the other thing that I would say is I'm always a big fan of the Next Pro tiebreaker format. They don't do ties. They don't do draws, I should say. I know better than to use the T word. But what they do instead is they do shootouts. They decide every game on a penalty shootout if it goes to after extra time, if it goes into a draw at the end of it. So I looked it up. He's faced 18 penalty shootouts in his career so far. Across all of his matches with Tacoma Defiance. So that's not nothing going into the signing. So we shall see. He is now the backup of Vegas, and we'll have to see what goes there. But we're not done with goalkeeper news yet.
But wait, there's more. Yeah, rounding out the trifecta here of keepers. RFC announced that they will continue and retain Will Meyer's services here. He's going to be the third keeper of the group. Didn't get any playing time per se, but it's good to see, a player that has familiarity with the club return, right? Especially he probably already has an established relationship with Koke. So I think this is a good pickup here.
Jason, I will continuously remind you that you never know when your second keeper will get a random freak injury and the third string will have to be called up as the backup. And then the first string gets a red card or an injury on the field. Remember, my friend, Nate Silvera dressed as the backup keeper to the USL Cup final in 2024. Never forget justice for Nate. That's all I'm going to say. But to your point, I think it is a great bit of business. We talked personally with Will at the Eastern Conference final. I then continued the dialogue with him at the block party. At the time, he was very positive about his chances of remaining with the club. And like you said, I think that this is a great gel opportunity so that there's not too much rotation or fragmentation in the keeper core. And what this can help with is as Koke works on making sure that the team remains like at the top of all of their abilities, it allows Meyer to help with the integration, right? Like if there's something that Koke, and I don't want to say doesn't have time for, but like can kind of delegate out, Will Meyer's right there as the gel man to help show Castro the ropes and then make sure that everyone feels like they're a part of the family. Because remember, Koke is still a recent father of somewhat, like between his love of Rhode Island FC, his love of our show, and the love of his daughter, and I put those in the right priority. He's got a lot on his plate. So getting Castro up to speed could help with Meyer kind of alleviating some of that responsibility. But now, hey, listen, Meyer's the 22nd player on the roster with Mabika gone. Is that enough players before we go to the break? Is that enough players for Rhode Island FC, or do you think how many more players do you think we're going to have signed? I guess is what I should really be asking.
I still think we need like 2 more. But like you said, when we come back, we will address the championship collective bargaining agreement expiration, USLPA updates and answers on whether or not RAFC will even be playing this season, all here on the Raising Anchor Soccer Show.
Now let's get back to the Raising Anchor Soccer Show on 990 WBOB with Matt Entrikin and Jason Carey.
All right, so it only makes sense to end off the show in a cliffhanger, right? That's how this works.
Love it.
I can't think of a better way to do it than talk about, are we even going to have USL Championship season? What's going on here?
I mean, technically, if you go in the USL Championship subreddits, everyone thinks it's over. Like, we had a good run. They're putting the end of life on the tombstone of USL Pro, as it was originally called. Listen, it's an excellent conversation. We will share what we know, and we will kind of unpack what we can. But obviously, all of this is a very constant moving, ever evolving subject, so bear with. And by the time people hear this, it could have changed, right? So technically, as of right now, the CBA has expired. It expired on December 31st. And so right now, the USLPA, the players are without a contract and therefore are eligible to strike at any point. On the other side of things, the ownership is now allowed at any given point to lock out the players, should they so decide, without a CBA protecting all entities. That's what these contracts do. But listen, that is going to be a very last-ditch effort from either side, because if either one of them pulls that trigger, it's a zero-sum game. Nobody wants to play that game, and this is a process. I mean, there have been over reportedly 30 discussions. I actually think this number's up to like 40, to be honest, but there have been over 30 at least confirmed negotiations since August of 2024, Jason. 2024, not 2025. Like, this has been an ongoing process. So are we as close as we should be by now? Absolutely not. Would I like to have seen this be across the finish line? Would all of the players, would everyone that participates in the USL Championship? Yes, 100%, but we're just not there yet.
And it feels like forever ago that you spoke with Connor Tobin, the executive director at the USLPA last year ahead of the lockout, and still sounds like not a lot of progress here has been made. And for maybe those of you a bit newer, you happen to miss it, you should definitely go back and listen to it. It's really, really informative. Good interview there.
Yeah, and you're right. Nothing has changed because they haven't moved on the topics that the USLPA has brought to the spotlight. Now, we are completely in different, attack categories now. Like at that time, the USLPA was like, don't follow the championship anymore. Block them on your social media. Now the USLPA is just, they're putting out information left and right. And some of the things, and it all goes across their mandate, which we'll quickly cover. They're opening some spotlights on some very interesting parts of the topics of these negotiations. So what does the USLPA want? Well, they want mandated health coverage. Right now, it's not guaranteed. A lot of clubs do provide. Some clubs at 100%, some clubs at only 50%, some clubs don't offer it at all. So they want mandatory health coverage, which I think anyone that has a job and commits their time and effort, if they get injured on the job, especially in a sport, that's a no-brainer to me. They don't want 10-month contracts anymore. They want year-round contracts, so that, again, that's part of their employment, unemployment, as well as their health insurance offerings. This one's interesting. They want guaranteed contract payouts of at least 75% of the confirmed and agreed upon salary in the event a club ceases operations. I think we should just call this the North Carolina FC rule moving forward. And they also, and this one's the one that's been the loudest talking point amongst kind of all camps involved, is they want an increase in player minimum salaries, which we found out, Jason, only recently is only going to impact 12% of the player population, which is 66 players. Like, this is not something where, you hear like, oh, we want a gajillion dollars. They want to elevate minimum standards for new players that would come into the league, of course, but then would only affect 66 players currently in the league.
That's like 2.5 players per team or something, right? Like, I mean, it's at most 3. That's
something.
Yeah, and currently championship players can be no lower than $2,600 per month across that 10-month span of standard USL contract. And that amount isn't necessarily their take-home pay. Instead, it comprises here of things like salary, housing benefits, health insurance contributions, and any potential signing bonuses that they may have per the current agreement. Housing and healthcare, though, are capped at 50% of that compensation.
So the league and the ownership are saying that what you want to raise that 12% minimum gap is a over 40% increase. This feels like when you get your employee review at the end of the year and they're like, sorry, we don't give more than like a 5%. So here's your 26-cent raise, right? Like, good job, attaboy. It feels like it's that. They're saying on their side of it that it's a 40% jump increase from the last CBA. But the CBA or the USLPA, excuse me, is countering back that it's a low population of impacted players, and it's only going to increase the cost by $15,000 per team on average. Now, there could be some teams that are like really hitting the bottom for pennies, I guess. But they're saying it's not even a big deal. And Jason, this is all after learning that the players can, at a minimum, take home $13,000 when you break down all the components like you just described. There is a potential for a player to only be getting paid $13,000 in this league to play at a professional Division II level. And at the top, there's players allegedly getting paid close to $200,000 to play. I can't talk tonight, but that's wild.
That's some wild disparity there. I think you would think if we have some players that like just cut a little bit off the top, spread it down, like, bring some more balance to this league.
It makes me feel like we have our own designated player rule, and we never even thought we would know that we had that. That's the disparity there. But what we do know, moving into this really quickly, is so these are the issues that make up the USLPA's not grievances, but their desires to create better professional standards around the championship CBA. The problem with this all is we've talked about this on previous shows. It's the complexity of these negotiations because of three things. One, it's not a single entity system like MLS, where the MLS negotiates on behalf of club owners because they own everything, and then they talk down to the players on what's going to happen. So it's just a two-party system. Here, it's the ownership, the league, and the players, and they all have their own priorities. The league wants to see the league grow. They need to make money. The New Rock group or whatever they are. The ownership, they're losing money every year, so they want to make sure they staunch the wounds as often as possible. And then the players want to get professional standards. So like, it's not as easy coming to terms with that many entities. And we've even heard, Jason, that it's not even that there's like a majority issue here in these breakdowns of conversations. It's just a select few clubs that continue to hold out on progressing these talks. My guess is it's the old MLS2 Academy feeder system mentality that we've heard, that old guard that still kind of exists around the league. It's the systems where they're trying to just move players up through an academy, sell them on, get a couple thousand, maybe get 50,000 off a player, rinse and repeat. They're not really here to build competitive rosters in the championship.
And we know when there was conversations about D1 that there were a few holdouts. I wouldn't be surprised if these are the same holdouts here against the CBA. Do you think there's any potential to see any like walkout or lockout this season?
I don't know. Here's my theory on it. The fact is we're not going to at least see it till March, right? Players are reporting in for medical. There's a whole preseason. It doesn't make sense for that to happen right now. That being said, if negotiations don't progress or at least make meaningful steps in the right direction for all parties, then I could see someone getting desperate and saying, yeah, it's time. We're not getting listened to, or we're not being respected in these talks. And a strike is always the last weapon. But here's the thing. The MLB had a strike like this back in 94, and they had a massive impact to their audience, to their revenues. And that was a league that had been around for a century. USL has been around for less than 2 decades. I don't think they survive if they take a lockout or a strike situation. If this happens, we could see a break, but not for World Cup. We could see a break where USL never returns after the World Cup. So if I expect to see anything, it's going to be around that April, May, June timeline. But I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail and we'll get to see continued USL Championship soccer for many years to come.
Yeah. Anyways, great show as always. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll catch you later. Anchors up.
Anchors up.
In the meantime, make sure to check out our friends at the Blazing Musket for all your New England soccer coverage, including RIFC news at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at RIFC Podcast. Our Instagram handle is at Raising Anchor, and you can always check out our website, raisinganchorpodcast.com. anchor.com. Anchors up.